Hey y'all, my name is Gabrielle and welcome back to Gabrielle's Guide to Books. I read actually more books than I thought I did in the month of June. Y'all, I had so much going on in June. I was traveling, I was taking a class, I was outside. I was doing a lot of things in the month of June, but lo and behold, I was able to get through 8 books in June. 6 of those books were physical books and 2 of those books were audio. So I cannot wait to dive into my impressions about these books with you all. If you like Black bookish content, go ahead and like this video and subscribe to this channel.
Even on the bad days, I thank God for making me brave, 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 brave.
I'll give you a rundown of the synopsis of the book, tell you my thoughts about it, and then whether I'd recommend it to you, as always. The first book is The Princess and the P.I. by Nikki Payne. This is one of those books that I picked up at the Black Romance Book Festival. And it is one of my first books by this author, but it came highly recommended at the festival, but also by a few friends and other fellow readers. So let's see. This book follows Fiona, and she is setting a plan in motion. Fiona's brother has passed away, and she is basically going to avenge his death. She is known as like a Reddit detective. Y'all, in my like other side of my life, I love Reddit. She's a Reddit detective and she like does her online sleuthing, but then there is this other actual private investigator, Maurice, who is really fine, y'all. And he's been doing like some small town scandals and things, but there is a situation where he and Fiona's paths cross and they sort of have to work together and try to unravel things related to like both a corporate crime and something related to her brother's murder. That sounds like it could be simple, right? No. Honey, I don't know how many storylines this book has going on. First of all, I will say, because this is a little bit on the like romance and mystery side, thriller side, I was actually really surprised that I liked this book. Again, I picked it up because of strong recommendations, but I was really surprised by the fact that I actually did like this book. But I will say there were so many storylines going on here, and it had a lot of different moving pieces. There's so much more to this book than I think the synopsis tells you, and I actually think that the synopsis actually does a really poor job of describing what this book is about, because I think that there might be more readers that this book could bring in if it was described a little bit better. So it is definitely more of a murder mystery, a thriller, but on the romance side, or I don't know if it's thriller is the right word, but like suspense for sure. It definitely has a lot of suspenseful elements. One of the other things that I think is really interesting that this does not describe in this book, that's a really interesting element. Cults are everywhere and people love to read things about cults and cult culture, and cult culture is a big part of this book. And that's not spoiling anything about this book, but I thought that like that would have been a really great selling point about this book. If you are the type of reader who does not like books that have multiple storylines and you're like, wait, which is the central storyline am I supposed to be tracking? There's a lot of characters, a lot of people going on. This may not be the book for you. The description does not do this book justice. So if this sounds like anything you might be interested in, I would encourage you to just take it a step further and find out a little bit more about the book. I'm not a fan of spoilers, so I'm not going to say, oh girl, this is what this book is actually about. This is the storyline that's going through this book. But if you want to take it a step further and you're interested in those things, I would encourage you to go to other platforms or other reviewers that might tell you a little bit more about this book. But I did enjoy this book and would recommend it. The next book that I'll talk about is Redwood Court by Delana Dameron. In my personal life, people have heard me talk about this book ad nauseum, okay? Because I really enjoyed this book. I don't know if you all did this in like school, but this was a practice that I've had like since middle school. I'm glad that stuff like Goodreads have come around, but I would like write on an index card like the things about the book and like especially like for book reports and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, this would be like a really great practice for me because I feel like I just go off on tangents about books. But anyway, so I have my little note card here about this book. I think that I spoke about this book with my past, present, and futures, that this was a book that I wanted to read before the end of the year. This was a book that one of my coworkers, her son had on his summer reading list, and she asked me had I ever read it, and I was like, oh, it's on my TBR. And so we decided to do a book club read of it together. It was a very interesting experience. So my coworker is a white woman, and she told me that she did not think that she would have a lot to, that she didn't think that she would relate to this book going into it, but she was pleasantly surprised by how much that she would relate to it. And it just really struck me by how much Black readers have to read so much about non-Black experiences, but we find something to relate to or something to hold on to. I do think that it's good for young people to read the quote unquote classic literature. I am so glad that schools are diversifying their reads that they're having students do, because they need to grow up and recognize that there are other people that have experiences outside of their own. Now, into the review of this book. This is a book that I really enjoyed. So this book, and I'm going to be looking down at my card, but this book is a coming of age story that follows Mika Tabor in the 1990s in Columbia, South Carolina. So I do think that this book is a coming of age story, of course, but I think that is only half true. This book is kind of misleading in the dust jacket, is it really does focus on, oh, this is a coming of age story about Mika, who is a teenager, but we learn so much about her grandparents, who just are like the heart and soul of this family, and really the heart and soul of this book. And we learn about her parents and her extended family. We learn about just the community in which she grew up in, because this is a story about a Black Southern working class family that are striving towards land ownership in the wake of post Jim Crow to the early 2000s. I think the themes of this book are Black love, community care, the effects of the Vietnam War, military service, what does it mean to be working class, what does it mean to be middle class. I think it's also about the effects of integration, the effects of gerrymandering, are definitely sort of these things that are happening in the background of this book. One of the things that I really love is that we also see strong relationships between grandparents and grandchildren, and the things that they teach the generations that come behind them. I think this book has a special place for me because this book is really taking place in the generation and the time period in which I grew up. So there were so many familiar elements of this book. Even though this book was about South Carolina and I grew up in Alabama, there were so many things that were just so Southern and so familiar and black about this book. I was nostalgic for a world that was described before cell phones existed, where there were books and cookouts and spades, and like riding bikes were just like normal activities. So there was just like this nostalgia about this world that existed in the 1990s for sure. Reading this book felt like you were just like sitting on the porch with your grandmother or with an auntie, and you were like talking about back in the day. This book felt like it was written for an adult to be like nostalgic towards, but it also felt like it was accessible to a teenager as well. Unfortunately, this author passed away in November of last year, and I'm really so sad because this book was amazing. I'm so happy that we have the gift of this book and the gift of her second book, which I'm sure is just going to be just as amazing. It really sent me into a spiral, because I'm just like, she was only 40 years old. Like, what she was able to create within that, and just the gift that she gave us. And so just like also that reminder to document things, to tell the stories that are in you, and then also to write the stories that are in you. The next book I want to talk about is Night Bloom by Peace Adzo-Mehdi. I'm sure I've not said that correctly, but I loved her first book, I believe, that was called His Only Wife. So I was really excited to read this book by her. And I was very excited also because this book talks about it being about the bond between friends. So I was like, yes, I'm very excited about this. I'm going to look at my Goodreads here. So this book had a lot of themes that I love. It was about girlhood. It was about mother-daughter relationships. It was about relationships between women, friendships between women, education. It was about family secrets. And also it had multiple points of view, which I always love. I really enjoyed this story, and I thought that it had so much to offer to readers. The writing was so good. She's just such a good writer, and I think this way that she writes his story just immediately, for me, just captured me. The setting, the story takes place in Ghana, and it's about two young girls. It's about Selasi and Okafor, and they just have completely different personalities. Selasi is very exuberant and funny, and Okafor is very quiet and studious. And they kind of are raised, I think, very much in the way that like cousins would be raised, because their mothers were best friends. There's an event that happens, and then Selasi's personality just begins to change. And at the same time, Okafor is accepted into another university that is in the US, and she has this dream, this lifelong dream of becoming a doctor. And so she goes to the US to do that while Selasi stays in Ghana. And it just really traces what happens with them. And there is another event that happens that requires Okafor to travel back to Ghana. And then there's sort of this moment with the two of them. I really enjoyed this book, but the structure of the book really detracted from how much I loved this book. Without giving too much away about the book, I think I enjoy books where we are learning the multiple perspectives along the way of the book. And I think that there's sort of a point where we are learning two different sides of the story, but kind of not side by side. And for some people, that type of structure may work. It's just not the type of structure that I typically prefer in a book, and that kind of threw me off as a reader. You know, if I could ask this author one question about the book, I would ask if the structure of the book was intentional, because if it was intentional, it would make sense to me, because I think the structure of the book basically, to me, prefaces one narrative over another, and that can just be a metaphor for just the dynamic in this book, in this relationship, and that would make sense to me. But if it was kind of like, no, I didn't think much about it, then I would be really, I think, disappointed. I want to know more sometimes, and there were time jumps in the book that I just wish that I knew more about what happened in some of those moments. Like sometimes we just got a summary of what happened in maybe a 4-year span, and I'm like, no girl, I want to know. I want to know what happened. But that's just me being nosy and just the type of reader I am. I'm a nosy reader, and I'm like, girl, this is the juicy part. I want to know what happened here. But, you know, I know that there's only limitations on how long a book can be. And, you know, I'm always a person that's like, make this book shorter. But yeah, I think that the author just has such a great writing style that this book is really worth a read. I really think that it has strong character development. I think one of the characters is really developed really, really well. I think there's so many, actually, now that I think about it, there is the friendship between Selasi and Okafor that is like front and center. But now that I think about it, the friendship between their mothers is also pretty interesting as well. And I didn't mention this, but like there's also an element of father-daughter relationships that runs through the book, and sometimes I just forget about that being something, because I care so much about mother-daughter relationships. But father-daughter, if you like things about father-daughter relationships, that's definitely in this book as well. I thought that this book was just a really, really great book. I would highly recommend it. I really liked this book, and definitely cannot wait to read another book by this author. Okay, y'all finally convinced me. I finally read Restore Me. It's a biggie, y'all. It's a biggie, but I did finally read it. I'm so glad that y'all convinced me to go ahead and read it. This was on my sexy summer TBR, and then I still wanted to like kind of force myself to read it, so I put it on my past, present, and futures. And on one of my trips in June, I just was like, let me just pull this book out, and I went through it. It did take a bit of time to read it, but I did. So just to catch you up, this book follows Sloane and Dominic, and Dominic is Sloane's late husband's best friend and the last man on earth she thinks that she should want. And Dominic thinks that Sloane is going to be his undoing, because this is his wife. This is his best friend's wife. I think that this book is one where I actually was like, ooh, this is gonna be messy. And like the storyline of this is really kind of messy about like, oh my gosh, like the man has died and y'all are gonna like fall in love. But I think it's actually also like unique and also kind of quite common in real life. And so I really enjoyed that. And I was really interested in how J.L. Seegers, and sorry, I didn't say this is Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. I just went into it, girl. This is Restore Me by J.L. Seegers. I think I went into this book not sure how she was going to pull it off, and I was just like really interested in how she was going to pull this off in this book. I really thought that J.L. Seegers really took real care with this topic. And also, I thought that she really did a great job of developing these characters, making the storyline convincing, and making this book, even though it was like such a really kind of messy, even though it's common, a messy situation, tender and also sweet. And I appreciated that. One thing I will say is this book was very spicy, really spicy. And I think what I appreciated is that it was spicy for a reason. But it was spicy, girl. So yeah, I ain't gonna hold you. Yeah, it was spicy. But yeah, I really did appreciate this story. I really liked it. I don't think it had to be 500 pages, but I really did enjoy this book, and I enjoyed it so much that after I finished this book, I went ahead and got the next book, the next series of books, which is the Revive Me series, and you'll just have to come back next month to see what I thought about those books. But yeah, so here we go. So yeah, I really did enjoy this, and I would say all the folks that advocated for this book in the comments, you were right. This was definitely worth a read. It was definitely worth my time. I enjoyed this one. The next book that I read is The Love Lottery by Nina High. Nina High is a new to me author. I heard her speak at the Black Romance Book Festival and thought that her books really sounded interesting, and so I picked this one up. This book takes place in the small town of Honeybrook, and it follows two characters, Zaina and Evan. And this small town has a love lottery. It's kind of like if swiping and matchmaking sort of merge, you would have this love lottery. But this is like a tradition in this town, this small town. These two are matched together. But Zaina is kind of like nonchalant. She's like, okay, I don't think that this is like, what is this love lottery? Like, I don't get into the hype. And Evan is new in town. He's fine. He's the dentist in town, and he's just gone through a breakup, and he's like, I don't know about this love lottery. But the two of them get matched together. She's like, I don't know about this, but he's like, okay, let's kind of see. And then they have to like go on scavenger hunts, go on all these dates, and it's just like, is this love lottery going to work? That's what this book is about. Y'all, this book is so stinking cute, okay? This is such a sweet and a quick read. I mean, it's such a quick read. It was so good. It was so sweet. And one of the things that I should have said is I think that this is a self-published book, and I'm really trying to read more self-published writers this year. This was like reading a Hallmark movie. You know what I mean? Like, because it had all the elements of a Hallmark movie, because it had a small town, a scavenger hunt. It had like the meddling small town person. It had a best friend who like in the town who owns a business. And it had two people who were kind of matched together, but were like, one was happy about it. One was like, no. And it's like, will the sparks fly between the two of them? I smiled so much reading this book because like, it was just a fun book, and it was just so wholesome, okay? This book was so wholesome. If you are just like, I just want to read something that gives me all the feels, that is going to be just like, I want to have a summer day romance where It just gives me all the feels of like just something wholesome, a sweet date. And I just want to get back to the basics of just sweet and genuine love. This is going to be the book for you. I will tell you, I was surprised that this book had a spicy scene or two. I really didn't think it was going to, but it did. And I was like, okay, girl, okay. This is such a sweet book. Like, so sweet. I think this will be a book that if you want to believe in love again, if it's a book where you just want to smile, it's just a book that you want to just be like, oh, like love is worth it. Everything works out in the end. This is your book. Like, this is a walking Hallmark card, a walking Hallmark movie. This is it. It was good. I highly recommend it. I don't know if Nina High has been signed to a publishing house. She should be, because this book is good. And I bought other books of hers that I can't wait to read, but I believe that most of her books are sold on her site. They might be sold on, I'll link wherever her books are sold below. The final physical book that I read is A Low Country Bride by Priscilla Williams. This is my first book by this author, but I was really intrigued because of the title. So I would say this is also one of those cute, wholesome stories as well. This book follows Maya Jackson. She works for a bridal gown brand in New York, but something happens that she needs to go back to her hometown of Charleston, South Carolina. She is there for a couple of months. So she finds this opportunity with a local bridal boutique that's there, and kind of sparks fly with the owner of that bridal boutique, Derek Sullivan. He's going through some things. He has a daughter. He's a widower, and they basically are sort of in close proximity together. And it's like, can something happen? Will sparks fly? Because I'm down here, but it's only temporary. And I got to go back to New York because, I got a career. That's kind of the synopsis of this book. I think that this book also gives a lot of Hallmark vibes as well, because it's a city girl returning to her small town, and she has a second chance at love again. There is a struggling business in town. There's also a man who has a lot of things going on, but he could also have a second chance at love again. I think that they both have like these background stories that sort of unfold over time, which I think is very Hallmark-esque. In a good way. And when I say Hallmark-esque, I say that in a good way because I love Hallmark movies, baby. There was zero spice in this book. And I don't think that zero spice means zero connection. But I do wish that this couple had a few more interactions with one another that helped to convince readers of their connection. There was a connection for sure, but I just wish that we might have been able to see it in different ways here. I also wanted to see a little bit more about Charleston and like low country vibes. It definitely mentioned some things about Charleston, some things about Charleston's history here. I think was probably hungry while I was reading the book, so I just wanted some more about, Charleston's food culture. And maybe, I think this author does do a lot about the Low Countries, so maybe some of her other books are actually taking place on some of the islands in the Low Country that have like a much larger Black population. One of the things that I thought was really interesting about this author and the books is that she writes her books from an Afro-Filipina lens. And that definitely came through in this book as well. I thought that this book was really cute, and if you're someone who likes a cute story, who likes that Hallmark book but doesn't like spice in a book, this might be one for you. So those are all the physical books that I've read. There were 2 audiobooks that I listened to, and I will put them up here. The first one was If Only for the Summer, and that was by Alexandra Warren. This was my first book by Alexandra Warren, and so I listened to this during a road trip, and I really enjoyed this story. This is a story about that takes place about Nova, who is a school teacher who is desperate for a break, and her best friend basically invites her down to Miami for the summer. Unbeknownst to her, or to Nova, her best friend's husband also invites his best friend to come down for the summer. So Guy and Guy's son Jackson also come down for the summer, and so Nova and Guy find themselves having to share a condo for the summer, and only for the summer. So that's the synopsis of this book. I really enjoyed this book. I felt like it was the perfect summertime romance, and it was just like so sweet. Even though I appreciated that we got to see them like really develop their relationship, I'm not a person who likes books where they're after a weekend together, they're like, I'm in love. I typically don't like that. And so I felt like this was a book that we got to see them really get to know each other. And another thing that I typically do not like is when kids are in the mix of the story, because I sometimes think when kids are thrown into the story, they're just like thrown in. I'm just like, why are these children in this story? Yeah, I just sometimes it's just a little weird. But there was a child in this story, Guy's son Jackson, who was super cute in this story, and I think the way that the interactions happen between Guy, Nova, and Jackson felt very real, very authentic, and very sweet. And so I really enjoyed them all being there. And because this was an audiobook, I must comment on the narrators. So the narrators for this book were Wesley Chabon and Winston James. And they were great narrators of this book, I will tell you that. And they kept me engaged the entire time. Shout out to Wesley Chabon, because she could do all the voices, okay? When she did Nova's voice, I was like, yes. When she did Nova's best friend's voice, I was like, okay, girl. When she did Guy's voice, I was like, honey, you can do a man's voice this well. And then when she did Little Jackson's voice, I was like, okay. And then I liked Winston James's voice as well. I didn't think that he could, get down with the women in the children's voice like Wesley Chabon did, but like, he was a good narrator, and he definitely gave Guy some character, okay? But I highly recommend this book for a road trip, and especially if you're taking that road trip over the summer, it would be the perfect type of book for you. It was super cute. The second audiobook and the final book that I'll talk about in this video is From Come Over to Come Home by Gabrielle J. So I have actually read and listened to books by Gabrielle J in the past, but they were in the mafia and all that type of thing, and I was just like, you know what, on this particular set of audiobooks, I just wanted something a little bit more tame, I will say. So I did find this one, and I really enjoyed it. This book followed Ren Michelle, who was a top real estate agent in North Carolina, living in this town of Brookwood. And she's a single mother, and she's trying to co-parent with her first love. And then the love interest is Dominique Pickens, who is a former NFL player and looking to make a home in Brookwood. And so basically they kind of have an instant connection, but is trying to see whether or not this connection can go beyond that. So I loved that this book happened in a small town setting. I don't know, there were a lot of books that happen here that I read that were in a small town setting, and this was one, and I loved it. And I just fell in love with these characters. Dom, I was just like, ooh, yeah, like a former football player, but he was a family man. He loved his family. Ren Michelle, she had her girl, like she had her girls. She had friends, and I was like, oh, maybe they're going to be in future books. So she had her friends. I loved them. And this was also a book where a child was involved. And again, I was just like, ooh, I don't know. But very great integration of this child into this book. I was just like, this is how you do it. This man was invested in this child. But this one was so sweet. This one just gave me all the feels, their relationship, the way that they developed it, the way that they were like getting to know one another. They definitely had an instant connection, but it was an instant connection that was able to grow. I will put the name of the narrators if I can find them on the screen. But the narrators for this book were perfectly fine. I had not heard either one of these narrators before. I don't think that their names were familiar to me. Let me try to see if I can go into this app really quickly. Okay, I do have the narrators' names. So the narrators were Jamie Lincoln Smith and Lorraine Ayres. I had not heard either one of these narrators before. Probably, if you like audiobooks, you are probably aware of them. So I thought that this was a great book to do on a road trip and super cute. Okay, you all, there you have it. Those were the 6 physical books and 2 audiobooks that I enjoyed in the month of June. And so let me know, what was the best book that you read during the month of June? Did you happen to read any of these books? Have you read any of these books before? Have you listened to any of these books before? Give me all the tea. I want to know, like, what's going on? What did you do in June? Was your life as hectic as mine? Did you get to read as much in June? July is looking to be the same way, but we will still be reading, okay? Before you leave, don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay glowing. Bye, y'all.
I can't help but think that there is something more to find, more to life than what I have right here, right now. Used to call it stable.